Hey everyone, I'm Steve from GamersNexus.net, and today we're looking at Logitech's G29 and G920 racing wheels. The G29 and G920 are effectively the same product, but the G29, which we have here, is the PS4 and PC version. The G920 is the Xbox One and PC version. Both will work on the PC, and this is a $400 unit. It ships with the wheel base, and the pedals included, along with a power adapter not shown here. The pedals, you've got your gas, brake, and clutch in that order, and then the wheel itself is where all of the expensive mechanical is contained, so that's where your $400 price point comes from. Other options on the market include the Thrustmaster T300, which is priced similarly to this. It's at $400 also. And then Thrustmaster goes all the way up to $600 or more, depending on which mods you get, which wheel you get, and how high end you go. So those are the main competitors on the market actively right now. The previous version of this racing wheel was Logitech's G27, and fans or users or those knowledgeable of the racing wheel space will recognize that the G29 looks very similar to the G27, and that's because it is basically a refresh. So this is similar to what we've talked about recently with some AMD products and other products, some Intel stuff. Product refreshes mean that they take something that exists and works, they take an existing architecture and upgrade it with some tweaks. So that's what's happened here. The wheel is the same geometry, it has the same feel, texture, and shape as the G27 wheel. The wheel is 270 millimeters across, it's about 11 inches or so, and the same as the G27. The major difference here between the two products, G27 and G29, other than the price, is the button layout, the addition of new buttons to the wheel, and then some of the internal motor stuff. So this uses a helical gearing system, which is what the G27 uses also. With racing wheels, at the high end especially, there are two primary systems through which the wheel is turned and operated. That's either helical gearing or a belt system, and you can think of the belt system really similar to any other belt that you're familiar with. If you think of how a belt works in a car, same idea, just much smaller scale. So Thrustmaster likes to use the belt system, and it's a newer technology. It's still being put through the paces, still sort of being determined how reliable that is over time. The helical gearing system is tried and true, is certainly a phrase that could be applied to it, but it is an older technology. That doesn't mean it's bad necessarily, but it does lose some of the advancements put in place by the belt system. That said, you know that it works and lasts for a pretty long time, so there are different pros and cons there. The belt system is argued to have a smoother action when turning the wheel side to side, and the helical gearing system sort of feels like, I don't really want to use the word grindy when you're moving it, because it's not an abrasive feel, but it does feel a little bit more stiff and rigid than the belt system. Now, some drivers may actually like that, and some might not like it, so it's really personal preference. It certainly feels grittier in that regard. Other additions to the G29 include the upgrade of Hall effect sensors, so these were not present in the G27, and they've been demanded by the racers in the community for quite a while now. Hall effect sensors basically use electromagnetics to sense the positioning and tracking of the wheel, which helps increase its accuracy in game, and that's been a big issue with any type of peripheral that is not a mouse or keyboard, including HOTAS and flight sticks and things like that, is the accuracy of input in the game. The G27 used optical sensors, which are more prone to damage or decay over time. They're certainly more prone to dust interference, and this uses Hall effect sensors, so that does increase cost a bit. We're not sure how much, but that certainly adds to it. Now, one thing I want to note here while we're talking again about cost is that the G29 does not include a stick shifter, even though it's got a clutch pedal over here on my right. And the previous model, the G27, did include a shift stick so that you could mount it basically to the same surface separately from the wheel and just shift like a car would. That is not included here. The new version of the G29 shifter that was made in tow with this product is $60, so you have to add that to the cost if you do actually want to use a stick to shift. If you don't want to use one, or if you're doing more racing games that are of the Formula 1 or GT style racing where you're using modern cars with flappy paddles, this does have flappy paddle shifters there, and they make a pretty strong click. You can hear when I do that here. So definitely very strong and clicky. Doesn't feel like cheap plastic like a lot of the other flappy paddles we've tested on lower end wheels. And that's what you're working with if you don't buy the additional shifter. The wheel is hand stitched and uses a brushed metal plate. It looks like a brushed aluminum plate here on the front for your crossbars and support. It's very sturdy and it mounts pretty well to most surfaces. You wouldn't want to mount it on something like this. This is a pretty loose table. It's just a folding table. You would want to mount it to something either more permanent like a play seat or some specialized need for seat type of thing where you spend extra money to get a sturdy bar to mount your wheel base to, or you just put it on a coffee table that's got room underneath for the pedal deployment. And that is one problem we ran into with the wheel. If you're not a very serious sim racer, you don't have the seat set up all existing already, that is an added cost you might want to factor in, or in the very least make sure you have some furniture that is already compatible with a wheel that very aggressively delivers force feedback. And that is something that this is actually pretty good at. The force feedback, as indicated by the name Driving Force of the G29, is very strong. You've got 900 degrees of rotation until it hits the border here. And when I hit that edge, you see there's a pretty hard resistance because it physically can't turn any further. And that resistance is similar to what you feel when you get hit in the game by another driver or you hit a wall or something like that. It's a very strong force, similar to what is experienced in arcades, but depending on which arcade game you're playing, potentially much higher quality. And the force feedback adds to the experience something that I do not normally experience in racing games when I'm using a controller or a keyboard and mouse, which is how I normally play with a keyboard and mouse. And that addition is a more gritty, real, true-to-life feeling where you feel more connected with the road. And that is something that will be added by the G27, which is cheaper, $240, by the G29, $400, by the Thrustmaster, competing $400 device, and by some of the Fanatic devices. So it's not like it's unique to the G29, but for those who have never used a racing wheel before, that is the one thing that you will appreciate most, is that you'll suddenly have a much more direct connection with the vehicle in game. And if you drive in real life at really any level of aggression, you'll feel in position to do that in the game. So it actually does convey a real sense of usability to have some experience in life driving your car. And for example, the one thing I picked up on immediately was when you make an aggressive turn and you let go of the wheel, it'll actually spin back until you grab it again to stop it, just like a real vehicle would do. Let's talk about the build quality here. The hand-stitched leather of the G29 racing wheel has a very high quality feel to it. It actually is real leather, and it feels similar to what you would get in a real car. So that is certainly adding to the experience. The shifter paddles are strong. They're made of metal, first of all, and they make a resilient click to them when you use them, so you do know for certain that it has been depressed when you're shifting in the game. And then the pedals are equally high quality in that the resistance applied to your foot when you're pushing it down, or in this case my hand, is fairly strong, and it changes based upon how far the pedal is pressed. So if you go get in your car and you push down the brake pedal, as the best example, there is a point at which the pedal begins to dampen as it gets pushed farther into the base. And the power output, depending on the vehicle, the power output will change based on how far or hard you're pressing it. That is conveyed here. The brake pedal has had a damper added to it, so that is not something that existed on the G27 for owners of the G27 racing wheel. And the damper, when you push it down, it actually requires a pretty huge amount of force. It's certainly not something you want to do with your hand like I'm doing right now. And that's good and bad. It takes a little bit to get used to. I liked the extra force. It's quieter, and it does feel more correct to a real car, but it makes it harder to push down. Hopefully that is something that will increase the durability of the pedals in the long run. I think it probably will. The clutch pedal I haven't had a chance to use, and that's because this does not ship with the shifter. And that's really one of the big flaws of the G29. The G27 for PC users is still a very good buy. It's $240 now. It comes with the stick, and it's basically the same product except with a few core items changed. But in terms of the look, the feel, and the mechanics, it's very similar. The main differences are the Hall effect sensors added to the G29, so those theoretically improve your accuracy, but really it's more of an issue of how long do the optical sensors last. And the other major difference is the pedal damper applied to the brake pedal. So if you're buying strictly for PC, you'll get a very similar feel from the G27 at a huge discount. And that's something that we strongly recommend looking into, especially if it's a starter wheel and you don't want to invest too much. And then if you're buying for PlayStation and Xbox, you're probably looking into things like the Thrustmaster options as well, which I'm not too familiar with. All I know is that they use the belt drive system, and that's gotten pretty good reviews so far from the community, but it's the jury's still out on how well that will hold up as time progresses. The quality of experience provided by the G29 is very high. It adds to gameplay considerably to have any racing wheel of a reasonable quality or better. This is a very high quality build construction. It's got a strong base. There's no sliding or wobbling when the wheel does exert its force feedback, and it is a pretty powerful kick. The in-game options for configuring games like Project Cars are very detailed and allow for user fine-tuning if you do want to change that force feedback or steering dead zones or things like that. And Logitech pays attention to a lot of the small details. So it is a very high-end build quality product. Everything is pretty agreeable with the wheel. The one thing that some users who are more enthusiastic may have a disagreement with is the use of that helical gearing system over the belt drive. But for someone like me, I actually do like the gearing system quite a bit. I like that it feels gritty and strong, and I do trust it because I'm used to it. Now, with all of that said, the price is high. So here's what I think. I think that this should either be a much cheaper setup, the wheels and the pedals, or in the very least, they should throw in the shifter with the rest of the bundle. So I would be a buyer of this kit closer to $300 or somewhere in that area, especially if it includes the shifter. Up until that point, I am likely a buyer of the G27 at $240. It's a very strong and durable wheel set. The base is similar to this in that it's very sticky and it doesn't get thrown off the table like some of the other devices on the market will do. They'll wobble, and it's cheaper. So for PC users, look at the G27. If you really want the G29 for the Hall effect sensors, sure, but don't upgrade from the G27 directly to this because it's not a massive upgrade, and that's a pretty big gap. You're paying $400 to make a small move. Overall, I'm very impressed by the integration and software support on Logitech's part with Project Cars and some of the other racing games. But Project Cars especially takes the cake because it allows the fine-tuning required of a racing wheel for those who are fanatical about it. And I do think that the build quality is very high. It's sturdy, it's stable. Those are important things. There's a hidden cost that you might need a special setup, a chair, or a base to mount the wheel to. So if you're new to racing and racing wheels, do consider that. Look at the play seat, for example. That'll give you a ballpark estimate of where those land you for price. It's in the $200 to $300 range, but you could do it cheaper with real furniture that's actually stable, like I was using with the TV when testing this. And the pedals stay in place and feel pretty good. They have grips that dig into the carpet if you've got carpet, and they have rubber feet that dig into the harder floors if you've got those. Look at other options. Thrustmaster has good stuff. The T300, the T500 RS, something like that. Type in T500 and you'll find it. And those are some pretty popular options for the PS3, PS4, and PC in that group. And then look at the G27. So that is all for this review. That was the Logitech G29 racing wheel. And check out the article linked in the description below for the full article review of this wheel. And of course, check out our Patreon page. Huge thanks to the 8 of you who have backed us so far on Patreon. Definitely starting small, but it gives us the flexibility we want to move away from traditional advertising options going forward and to continue being creative and objective in our content creation. That is all for this time. I will see you all next time.